We're very happy to have him here today. Please give a very warm and very loud interlocution welcome to Joseph Stiglitz.
Hello, Professor. Very nice to meet you. Please have a seat.
Professor Stiglitz, I'm well aware of that's not the way to start an interview, you know, showing you something you said 2016. But if I can just remind you, having said you don't have sleepless nights because of Donald Trump, because the likelihood is very small. 9 years later, how do you sleep?
Not well. It's been a worse nightmare than we could have anticipated. His first regime, his first 4 years, there was a lot of rhetoric. He didn't do a lot. There were some bad things that happened. I don't want, you know, if I lived in one of the countries that he banned, I wouldn't be very happy. But for most Americans, it was a lot of noise, but not a lot of action. But what's happened in the few months since he became president on January 20th has been a revolution. It's like a cultural revolution, like they had in China. The attack on our universities, on our judiciary, on our legal profession have been unprecedented. And you know, even one of the judges said the way they've arrested people and deported them to El Salvador to put in these terrible prisons is, he described it as Kafkaesque-like. You just disappear.
So what you say is what a lot of people say, that, you know, the first 4 years might have been a bit chaotic. He was almost as surprised as we were, as you were, that he was elected. Would you agree with the people who say the second term is way more planned, way more deliberate, and in that case maybe also way more dangerous for some people?
Exactly. It has been you know, unbelievable in some ways. The amount of damage that has already been done that will be hard to reverse. We continue to be optimistic. Maybe that's a characteristic of Americans, that we keep saying, well, it's going to implode. I think you heard yesterday from
Elon Musk, the whole thing, right?
And that there's going to be a fight between Musk and Trump. That was predicted, and yesterday it broke out. So there's always the hope that there will be an implosion. And that hope is what gives us ability to sleep.
Okay. So that you don't have sleepless nights. I think we have to, you know, that's a disclaimer. We probably don't have to tell you all that Professor Stiglitz is highly critical of Donald Trump. We will be trying to put other kind of, you know, the other side in as well. But I was just thinking, and I looked it up. There are these, you know, 5 stages of grief by Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, which was a very a Swiss lady who talked about it. We have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. At what stage are you at with Donald Trump?
We're not at acceptance.
Okay.
We're still part of the resistance. At Columbia, which is one of the universities that has gotten his ire and has been attacked strongly, there's a lot of faculty resistance to accepting the loss of academic freedom. We know we may have to accept a price. And that's a kind of acceptance, but it's not acceptance of giving up our academic freedom. It's acceptance of the reality that we live in a new world.
What do you make of that topic? Because we hear a lot about Harvard, we hear a lot about foreign students not being allowed to enroll, some being kicked out, and you alluded to it. That's a, you know, that's a primal right of people. Is it as dangerous as some say, or is it a typical, maybe a Trump-esque thing that we might not be talking about anymore in a couple of months?
It's very much the latter. Let me say, we're in the eye of the storm. Mm-hmm. We read about it in the New York Times every day. It's not what we feel. What we feel is enormous uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And though I think you put it correctly, there have been a lot of threats. All our grants being cut off. And since World War II, American universities have grown with enormous support for the government. We've been the basis in our universities for the research that has given America its comparative advantage. Mm-hmm. You think of America, the high tech. Where did that come from? Yeah, it was research mm-hmm. in our universities. And so there was that kind of partnership, an understanding of how we work together. And that's been destroyed. But in spite of the threats of cutting grants, and many grants have been cut, we just don't know where this will land. Is it another one of those instances, as you said, where there's a lot of noise but no follow-through? Yeah. Or will there be follow-through?
But we live in an era of threats and of noise. How do we handle that on a global scale, also economically? We talk a lot about that shock and awe strategy that comes from the US, which gives all the others, not from the US, a lot to think about. How do we tackle those new trends? How do we fight back?
Well, I think one has to begin by analyzing the possibilities and thinking about the impossible happening. Mm-hmm. It was impossible that Trump got elected, but it
Twice.
happened. But it happened, right? And it was impossible that really you could have a break between China and the United States. We were so interdependent. Mm-hmm. The way Europe put it was de-risking, and I thought that was the right way of putting it. But with the tariffs that Trump threatened, it really was a schism. Mm-hmm. One has to start contemplating what would happen if the next stage actually occurred. Mm-hmm. And then you have to think about, given those very unthinkable scenarios that have to be thinkable, how do you respond to these kinds of risks? And one part of it is you have to be resilient and diversified. And what we saw in the United States in the pandemic and the post-pandemic inflation, we were not resilient. Mm-hmm. And we now know we are overly dependent, for instance, on Taiwan for chips. Mm-hmm. So we failed in both respects. We've not been adequately diversified. We're not adequately resilient.
Mm-hmm. Which brings us to the topic of tariffs, in a way. Afterwards, I was just thinking while you were speaking. I mean, we're in Europe, and there's always been that long-lasting friendship between the USA and Europe. And all of a sudden, we have people like J.D. Vance coming to the conference in Munich, talking with almost a disdain about Europe. Is that a current theme within the administration? Do you fear that there might be long-term consequences to that very tight relationship, friendship even?
Very much so. I mean, I think one of the things that Europe should take away from the fact that Trump got elected twice is, unfortunately, America is not a reliable ally. Mm-hmm. And that has profound consequences, both for Europe and for America. One of them is, I think Europe needs to have its own European Defense Force. there was always...
Which is on its way now, but
It's on its way,
which will take time.
And I think it will be good for the European economy. I've always been skeptical about defense spending. I wrote a book where I said we were spending too much on weapons that didn't work against enemies that didn't exist. But we now have those enemies, and we need increased defense expenditure, and it will help stimulate the European economy in both short run and in terms of research.
Having said that, and in search of that famous light at the end of the tunnel, can we, and we don't want to have just half empty glasses, can we take those examples also as a kind of opportunity for Europe, for other countries, for other economies, to be finally able to say we have to look for ourselves and be independent as possible?
Very much so. Let me just give you two examples. One of them is you are going to be under enormous pressure from the United States not to have a digital tax.
Exactly.
The tech companies used to have a lot of influence on the Trump administration. I think they still do, in spite of the fallout between Musk.
There's one who doesn't have that influence anymore.
But they have been putting a lot of pressure on the government, and the U.S. government is putting a lot of pressure on Europe and on India and Brazil and countries around the world not to have digital taxes. Digital taxes are an important way of raising revenue in the 21st century. And these monopolies are getting enormous profits, and you should tax profits where they are, excess profits, where they, monopoly profits, where they occur. So you have to resist that pressure, I think. You have to have your own policies. And a related thing is you have to regulate the social media and AI. Social media and AI can have dangerous effects on our society. We've seen the polarization that results. We've seen the mis and disinformation and how it can really undermine our society. In Europe, you've created a framework for DSA, Digital Service Act, Digital Marketing Act, to try to regulate it. And let me say, I think those regulatory frameworks can actually promote good innovation because they encourage innovation to go in a way that is consistent with societal well-being. So to me, those regulations are pro good innovation. So again, you're going to be put under a lot of pressure to get rid of those regulations. I think Europe has to stand up against that. But the second way where this is a real moment of opportunity for Europe is that a lot of American academics, scientists, are looking to leave.
So we have a brain drain, you say.
There's a reverse brain drain. The American academia reached the level which it has today largely as a result of World War II and the enormous flight from Europe to the United States as a result of what happened in the 30s and the war. Already there's a brain drain going the other way.
You being an example, for example. You don't live in the United States anymore.
Well, we divide our time, but I've accepted a visiting position in Paris. And Paul Krugman has accepted a position in the Netherlands. Another distinguished historian has taken a position in Canada. So America, and let me say, a lot of Americans are thinking, are getting passports. They want, you said, how do you deal with these uncertainties? At the individual level, people are trying to think about the unthinkable, and they say, we need to get passports, even from countries where our grandparents had to flee.
Speaking about the unthinkable, until Liberation Day, a lot of people were thinking that's unthinkable. You know, the tariffs and how they change. And, you know, I think about that chart that he showed with the tariffs. And I was looking through some of your books and reading some of your, rereading some of your books. In The Price of Inequality, 2012, you write, tariffs protect old and tired industries that have lost their competitiveness and are not likely to regain it. Hasn't the administration read your books?
I don't think so. And if Trump had read it, and one of his friends said he finds it difficult to read more than one paragraph.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So you know, and I don't always write as short as I should. So.
But in a nutshell, I mean, you know, he says tariffs are the most beautiful word in the English language. You don't agree. Tariffs don't work.
Exactly. Tariffs are taxes. Mm-hmm. And they're taxes that are borne by both consumers, and when they're imposed on steel and aluminum, actually by producers of cars, producers of things that use steel and aluminum. And so those tariffs destroy the competitive advantage of the U.S. Mm-hmm. and actually lose jobs. You know, it's sort of ironic. He says he wants the tariffs are to regain jobs. But actually, by increasing the prices of the inputs, mm-hmm. they actually destroy jobs. Mm-hmm. Now,
it will increase prices in the United States.
And they will increase prices. They won't restore the jobs in the deindustrialized parts of the United States. That was the point I was making in that earlier book. I was in an amazing car manufacturing company in China in March. They were producing 1,000 cars a day with 2,000 workers. Mm-hmm. And the 2,000 workers were mostly just watching the robots. It was just amazing. The robots were doing everything. He said, once we get this really working, we won't need all those workers. It will just be the robots. Mm-hmm. The workers were just making sure the robots were well behaved. Mm-hmm. And half of the people in the company are doing research. So it's not the old style blue collar jobs, it's research. So even if we were able to bring back manufacturing, it wouldn't bring back the jobs to the deindustrialized parts of the United States.
Plus, it will be difficult to achieve that high level that we already see in China, which brings me to the topic of China. We have an interesting cartoon, maybe we can show it, and I hope you can see it too, Professor, about the role of China. We see Donald Trump here, kneeling in front of Xi in China. It's not the art of the deal, it's the art of the kneel. Could China be the main profiteer of the whole tariff discussion? Where do you see the global shifts go? Where will the economic power lay in the future?
Well, right now, in the short run, the cards are clearly in China's hands. Yeah. And the reason why I say that are a couple points. You know, the tariff wars have broadened out from just tariffs. There are threats on both sides, cutting off sources of exports. So it's not only imports, it's exports. China has magnets, rare earths. The U.S. has certain technologies. In that broader landscape, the things that we depend from China, we can't replace. Mm-hmm. Whereas the things that China needs from the United States, you can find other suppliers. So China has a monopoly on a number of things that we're very highly dependent on. Mm-hmm. Secondly, on the import side, in the case of China's imports from the United States, they're largely things like soybeans, agricultural goods. China can get those from Brazil, Argentina. On the other hand, the kinds of things that we import from China, there's not an alternative supplier. Eventually, they might be able to be produced in the United States. Eventually, they might be able to produce in some other country, but that will take 3, 4, 5 years. So the reality is that right now, the cards are very much in China's hands.
When we talk about other big economies, one country that often really doesn't get a lot of discussions is India, and India is already the most populated country in the world. Will further rise with the economies. Where do you see India in the future?
Well, India has a number of problems that make me a little bit less optimistic than some people. It doesn't have the infrastructure. Going back to the broader issue of the U.S. being able to bring back jobs, manufacturing to the United States. When I talk to entrepreneurs who want to come and produce in the United States, they say there's not the logistics, there's not the supply chain. And those are extraordinarily strong in China and very weak in India. So some of the barriers to production in the U.S. are also problems in India. And India hasn't made the kind of commitment to innovation and to science. They have some great institutions, but unfortunately, a little bit like Trump, Modi is not a strong supporter of democracy. And there's been an attack on the universities in India.
So we have parallels there.
There are parallels there, and I think that in the long run will undermine the success of India.
Speaking of the long run, where do you see, as the title says, the principles for economic success in the future, when we look at the bright side again?
Well, I think the bright side is that democracies, countries that support science, innovation, freedom, are likely to prosper. And this is Europe's moment, I think, because Europe is the only place in the world right now, as a whole region, that is really committed, with a few exceptions, and we won't go into those, with a few exceptions, to democracy, human rights, and science. And those two are very much related. Science was the product of the Enlightenment. But the Enlightenment is also what gave rise to democracy. Thinking about how we organize our society to allow the flourishing of how do we organize our society to make sure we have shared prosperity, that we can make advances, understand nature. It's oppressive societies that always want to attack our universities, academic freedom. And that's why I think this is really Europe's moment.
Let's go to some of the questions from the audience. We maybe have 5 more minutes to go. And as you can imagine, a lot of questions about the US, a lot of questions about Trump. I want to pick one, which comes back to Switzerland as well. How representative are Trump's actions for the relationship with Switzerland? I don't know how much you can go into that, but can companies, Swiss companies, which are here, which are present here as well, remain reliable partners with the US? We do a lot of business with the US.
Yeah. So, I mean, putting aside for the moment the tariffs, which for many companies is hard to put aside. The fact is that there is not hostility between most Americans and Europe. This is all a Trump administration problem. It's not a people-to-people problem. It's not a company-to-company problem. And so I think one shouldn't, if anything, things are going the other way. What I mean by that is Canadians, for instance, are boycotting American products. Some Europeans are boycotting Tesla. It's an inferior product anyway, but so you're not
Let's
losing
keep that
it.
on.
We'll leave off that. But the fact of the matter is, there's no hostility between Americans and Europeans. So I think one can go ahead and do business if you can manage the tariffs. And I was talking to somebody yesterday here, and he said, we produce a product that is so good that Americans will buy it anyway. Even we'll just raise the price. There'll be inflation. Everybody's prices are going to go up. If you want a high quality product, you're going to have to pay more. And we'll be able to sell. So that was an optimistic note that I enjoyed hearing.
Let's keep it optimistic then for the end of the interview as well. I hope. Final question, Professor Stiglitz. In one of your books, you dedicated the book to your 4 children, and you wrote, in the hopes that they will inherit a world and a country that are less divided. Unfortunately, we don't see that at the moment. But how big are your hopes that you might that this might come true in a distant or foreseeable future even?
The dark cloud has made many Americans realize how much we have to cherish, how fragile our system is, how our divided society has put all that we've done in 200 and some years, all the wars we fought for democracy, for human rights, all of that at risk. And so I think the hopeful note, and let me say I'm ambivalent, but the hopeful note is that having gone through what we are just going through and realizing the role that inequality, the lack of shared prosperity has played in giving rise to this political dysfunction, will make Americans rethink our economic model, our social model, our political model, and the outcome of that will be a strengthened economy, and I think a more equal society.
It sounds like a brave new world. Professor Joseph Stiglitz, thank you so much.
Yep,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.